Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. As the humanitarian crisis in Gaza has deepened over past weeks, a host of Jewish organizations and Jewish leaders around the world, including rabbis, have spoken out expressing their concern. But one new petition, an open letter signed by more than 80 rabbis, both in North America and Israel, has particularly struck a nerve. The reason? The rabbis signed onto the letter are all Orthodox, a community that is generally associated with the right, in Israel, usually the political far right. And in the United States, Orthodox rabbis have been particularly reluctant to publicly question or criticize the government of Israel. And that's why this letter, declaring that Israel must, quote, assume its share of responsibility for the profound suffering of Gaza's civilian population, expresses concern over, quote, extremist settler violence, and criticizing the Israeli government's support of a vision that involves sending Palestinians into exile, has stirred up such controversy. Spearheading this petition is an 86-year-old Orthodox rabbi, an educator named Yosef Blau. He's a former president of the Religious Zionists of America. He recently retired from his post as spiritual advisor at Yeshiva University after 48 years, and he made Aliyah, moving to Jerusalem 5 months ago. My conversation with Rabbi Blau is coming up, but before it, I speak to Haaretz correspondent Judy Maltz to understand the nature of the letter, the controversy around it, and the unlikely political maverick behind it.
I'm Esther Solomon, Editor-in-Chief of Haaretz English. Around the world, the fight is on to preserve critical and independent media. Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, upholds its long tradition of accurate, committed, and incisive journalism, refusing to bend its reporting to pressure from any government or leader. A digital subscription to Haaretz gives you up-to-the-minute news and analysis in English from journalists who live Israel's reality and are committed to covering the Middle East and its global repercussions. At the same time, your subscription supports the cause of a free press that holds the powerful to account in Israel and around the world. I invite you to become a subscriber to Haaretz now. Just go to Haaretz.com and use the code Haaretz10, that's Haaretz with the number 10, for 10% off an annual subscription.
Judy Maltz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Allison.
Judy, tell us about this petition, who signed the petition, and why it has been so controversial and stirred up such a fuss in the modern Orthodox community in North America and among religious Zionists in Israel, a very overlapping group of people.
So this was a letter that was published recently. I guess you could call it an open letter. And what it said is that while Hamas is largely to blame for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we cannot absolve Israel's government from responsibility as well. It is mostly about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, specifically the famine. But the letter also addresses the issue of escalating settler violence in the West Bank. And interestingly, it refers to the West Bank, as most religious Zionists would, as Yehuda v'Shomron. But in parentheses, it says West Bank, which is pretty interesting considering who wrote this. The letter also talks about what it describes as, quote unquote, disturbing proposals for forced so-called voluntary exile from Gaza, and proposals also disturbing for sacrificing the remaining hostages in pursuit of so-called total victory. But probably the most important thing it says, I think, is that Orthodox Jews, as some of Israel's most devoted supporters, bear a unique moral responsibility for what's happening. And to quote directly from the letter, it says, "We must affirm that Judaism's vision of justice and compassion extends to all human beings." End quote. So I don't think it's different from many other such letters that have been published in recent weeks, ever since news has said about the famine in Gaza. The reason this one in particular has drawn so much attention is because of who has signed it. These are Orthodox rabbis. And as we know, Orthodox Jews, unlike Reform Jews, have been some of the biggest and most steadfast supporters of this government. Orthodox Jews, for the most part, tend to be right-wing, and that is true in Israel and the diaspora. They tend to support the settler movement, and human rights or Palestinian rights are not usually one of their top priorities. They're also very sensitive about what you call hanging the dirty laundry in public, fearful that any reference to wrongdoings by Israel will fuel anti-Semitism. And as we know, anti-Semitism is a very real problem these days. So that's why I think this letter is really a big deal. And I think the fact that they got 80 rabbis to sign it is pretty impressive. So who are these rabbis, you asked? I would say that for the most part, these are Orthodox rabbis who are known to be pretty moderate, although I would not call them leftists or extreme leftists, as some people are portraying them. I'd say that most of them probably did not vote for Donald Trump or for Bibi Netanyahu. They tend to be more outspoken on issues like women's participation in Orthodox religious life and on LGBTQ inclusion in the Orthodox world, and less so on the issue of Palestinian rights. As far as I could see, there are not among the signatories rabbis who belong to organizations like Rabbis for Human Rights. I mean, these are pretty mainstream rabbis. A lot of these rabbis are affiliated with a group called Torat Chaim, which is an organization of more progressive-minded Orthodox rabbis. And there are also quite a few women rabbis among the signatories, which goes to show you that this isn't exactly your typical Orthodox or even modern Orthodox group.
Judy, tell us what the backlash has been against the petition letter.
Okay, there's been a tremendous backlash, especially on social media. And naturally, the backlash has come from the more conservative right-wing elements in the Orthodox world. So I've seen some of these people who are calling out these rabbis, call them everything from virtue signalers to Hamas collaborators to capos and obviously self-hating Jews. I've also seen people dismiss them as not really Orthodox. And as I said before, there were quite a few women rabbis in this group, and many in the Orthodox world would not even recognize women rabbis. The main criticism, though, isn't about what they wrote, because it's really difficult to contest the fact that there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza today, or that settler violence is spreading in the West Bank. The criticism is about their taking a stand, whether legitimate or not, against the government of Israel.
Finally, Judy, briefly tell us, who is Rabbi Yosef Blau, our interviewee on this podcast, who spearheaded this letter and petition? You have a unique personal connection to him, don't you?
Yeah, you could say that. Okay, I'll reveal a secret. Rabbi Blau was my elementary school principal at the Jewish Educational Center of Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I spent many hours in his office as a young pupil at that school for stirring up trouble in class. So I assume he will remember me. As I remember him, he was a very kind and gentle man, very mild-mannered, not like some of the other administrators who could be pretty scary in that school. After he left the school, I I didn't really keep up with him for many years, but I know that he held some very high positions in the Orthodox establishment. He was the head of some association of Jewish day schools. He went on to become the president of the Religious Zionists of America. And he also served as the spiritual advisor of Yeshiva University, which is a real pillar of the modern Orthodox movement in the United States. Based on my personal recollections, I was frankly surprised to learn that he had become such a maverick, because in many ways he doesn't fit the mold. And by the way, Allison, this is not the first time he has gone against the grain in the Orthodox world. He was among the first rabbis to talk about the need to address sexual abuse in the Orthodox world, and has become very well known as an advocate for survivors of child sexual abuse. So this has been clearly something in his DNA for a very long time, this sense of compassion, I guess you could call it, for those who are suffering, whether it be hungry Palestinians, as we have recently learned, or victims of rape and child abuse. Rabbi Blau, by the way, was the keynote speaker last year at the launch of the U.S. branch of a group called Smol Emuni, the Religious Left. It was a group formed in Israel a couple years ago, right after the new government was established by some very well-known religious leftist activists. He got a lot of flack from his critics for participating in such a blatantly leftist event. I mean, they're called leftists, this group. But as you can see, it clearly hasn't deterred him. In fact, I think the positive feedback he's gotten in certain corners of the Orthodox world could explain why he's decided now to push the envelope even further.
Judy Maltz, Haaretz correspondent, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and helping us get to know the background for our next guest, Rabbi Yosef Blau.
Always a pleasure, Allison.
My conversation with Rabbi Blau is next. Rabbi Blau spoke to me from New York, where, despite his retirement, the 86-year-old rabbi is on campus welcoming the new student arrivals to Yeshiva University. Rabbi Yosef Blau, welcome to the Haaretz Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rabbi, your passionate, strongly worded petition, to which more than 80 rabbis initially signed on — I would imagine there are more signatures since then — it has caused quite a stir in the Orthodox community. Can you first tell us what compelled you to initiate it? Was it something specific, an action, a statement, photographs that you saw and witnessed that particularly disturbed you and made you feel like you needed to speak out and organize others to speak out as well?
It's difficult to give a specific event that motivated me. The truth is, someone contacted me amongst a group of Orthodox rabbis who felt similarly, and asked if any of us would write a statement. And I was open to that opportunity. Having made Aliyah about 5 months ago, I felt a certain greater freedom to express some of my concerns, because it'd be more difficult to claim that I turned somehow anti-Zionist if I just made Aliyah.
So these were issues that bothered you while you were still in North America, but it was living in Israel that gave you the freedom to express them. There wasn't something new or different or an insight that you gained living in Israel for the past 5 months that changed your views.
Well, let's separate the two issues that the petition focused on. One of them is the growth in Jewish violence in the West Bank. This particular issue has concerned me for years because it's part of a broader concern that I have about the shift in the world of religious Zionism, which is the world that I grew up in and have identified with essentially my entire adult life, from being the most moderate force in the Israeli government and incorporating within it a large variety of views on pretty much every issue outside of religion in the state, to become more and more associated with the extreme right. And I've written about this, and I've been very concerned about it. So this was there all along. What was new to me was the willingness within the community that I was part of to literally deny the problem of famine in Gaza. And this became more and more apparent when I was in Israel because of the discrepancy in what publications people read. But this had started earlier as well.
In the time since the petition was published, what has been the response to it that has reached you personally? It's been a very short time, but I would imagine that a lot of the public exchange I've seen regarding it, the debate, has reached your ears as well.
I've received numerous personal comments from people that I've seen on the street and at different occasions, and emails, of course, ranging from the most positive possible, inspiring, etc., to calling me a traitor. And a number of them saying that I am going to be responsible for the deaths of thousands of Israeli Jews, which I find extremely difficult to not only accept, to understand. I have no illusion that the letter or articles will change the Israeli governmental policy. And it's certainly not going to influence Hamas's policy. I openly state that Hamas is primarily responsible for the famine as well as responsible for the killing and the terroristic attacks. I don't get it. I would be thrilled if the Israeli army somehow modified its behavior in allowing and not just more aid to enter, but to give more opportunities for distribution, which I don't think would significantly affect the conduct of the war. I was very careful not to discuss the issue which everyone in Israel talks about, prioritizing the rescue of the hostages or continue or winning the war. Though I'm personally very skeptical about the notion, quote unquote, of winning the war any more than what has been accomplished in killing the leadership of Hamas and seriously damaging its military capacity. But that's not my expertise. And my hope, and I must say that the extent of response, the coverage in the media, the requests for interviews, I don't mean to dismiss yours as not the most significant, has somewhat astonished me. The statement has definitely touched a nerve. Just a few minutes ago, I was checking the New York Times online, and there's a whole article on it. It was me being arrested, which I would never have expected. My goal was and remains to, one, create a conversation and not have it, well, the Orthodox rabbinate always supports the Israeli government no matter what. And that has happened. No one can question that. Secondly, I wanted to create a different discussion, which is what should be the role of the rabbinate, what issues should it be focused on when it makes public statements. The rabbinate obviously refers to a lot of different people. I was very open about expressing concern that the modern religious Zionist rabbinate was not saying we are concerned about famine taking place in Gaza. Our concept of Judaism is one that does not allow to talk about expelling all the Palestinians. That Jewish violence, and in particular that it's done where there is a Jewish government and a Jewish army, and it does not function with it, including situations where attacks took place on the West Bank, and some of the violent people attacked the army for not being on their side sufficiently. And I want to hear many more voices. Now, I should clarify, though, even though I use the word settler, I don't at all mean all the settlers. My son and his family lives in Alon Shvutz, which is beyond the Green Line. I did not suggest a political solution. I don't think that is the rabbi's role. I think the rabbi's role is to take what I think are moral stands.
And settler violence and famine in Gaza are to you moral issues?
The two issues are different, but I think there is a certain commonality because of the role that the Religious Zionist Party, and I am throwing in Otzma Yehudit, even though it's not officially a Religious Zionist Party, but its leadership is all religious Zionists of some kind or another.
Right, that's Itamar Ben-Gvir's party.
Right, in taking extreme stands within the government. I mean, these are the people who speak in favor of starving the people in Gaza, of taking the equation with the biblical Amalek literally, which is a very radical stand from a Jewish halachic perspective.
Rabbi, many of those signed on to the petition are rabbis in North America. You yourself, until very recently, lived in the United States. What do you say to the reactions of rabbis who would not sign on to the petition on the basis that it is not their place to criticize Israel publicly, that doing so fuels, what is already rising anti-Semitism in the United States? Do you sympathize with the arguments of those who maybe feel the same way as you do, but won't sign the petition that you initiated?
I am well aware of people who feel that way because they told me. I understand, but I think it's a mistake in judgment. I think not taking a stand increases anti-Semitism in the United States. One, though real anti-Semites are going to be the same anyway. I'm talking about the broader American populace. And I have a much more complex notion of the interaction between American and Israeli Jewry. And part of Zionism has been recreating Israel as the center of Jewish life, and how Israel is perceived in the world affects Jewish life everywhere else, including the United States, and probably more so in countries of smaller Jewish population. Actually, my concern very much is, and I don't want to sound over the top, of the future image of Judaism. I'm concerned about it in America as associated with a right-wing Israeli government, no matter what, even if it's not seen as very concerned about human rights. And I'm concerned about it in Israel. Again, I think the two interact very much. I'm very concerned. I haven't made a study of secular Israelis, but if I put myself in their shoes, if I were a secular Israeli and I watched the role of the religious Jewish spokesman in the Israeli government, whether it's the Haredim who refuse to fight in the army or even seriously identify with the country, or the religious Zionists who see things in very messianic terms, and therefore they can do anything because they're convinced that this is the will of God, I would be turned off to religion.
Rabbi, you said you want to show that the modern Orthodox religious Zionist community is not a monolith. How large a share of this community do you believe the views in the petition reflect in North America and in Israel? Do you think it's a tiny fraction, fringe, or do you think there are more people out there in your community who are thinking this and staying silent, and therefore that's why the petition maybe touched a nerve?
I think there's more people out there than we know, based on comments that I've gotten. But of course, that's not statistical, and one has to be very careful in making those kind of judgments. I also think that we're beginning to see, in America and Israel is different because of serving in the army, but in America at least, the younger element is beginning to be more questioning of the supposed consensus, which is obviously true in the broader Jewish community and the broader American community, where Israel is suffering terribly. The percentages in the studies are not as bad as they might be, simply because they're all the older people in it. I think this trend is growing in younger Orthodox Jews as well, but I'm not really sure whether it's quantitatively significant.
Finally, Rabbi, I have to tell you, I've spoken to people who have known you for many years as an accomplished, very respected, but rather mild-mannered mainstream modern Orthodox rabbi and educator. And they are rather surprised to see you emerge as such a political maverick in your presumably retirement and so late in life. I'm not saying that you're not part of the younger generation that reflects these views. But they're probably even surprised that you're speaking here on the Haaretz Podcast. Have you surprised yourself, your friends, your family?
Somewhat. There has always been a side of me that was a bit of an individualist, and my understanding of the rabbinic training that I got and the mentoring by the rabbinic figures that taught me was that you're supposed to come to your own conclusions, not simply mimic that which everybody else says. And there have been areas in the past in which I took positions that I don't think should have been controversial, but were controversial. I've been involved to various degrees with concern about abuse in the Orthodox community for 40 years. I've been very careful to try to separate my public persona, how I interact with the students in yeshiva, from my personal activities outside of yeshiva. Now, it is true that now that I'm retired, I have less compunctions about doing so. As a speaker, I'm not a very fiery speaker. When I talk about things, when I speak Friday night, for example, at the yeshiva, which I've done for all these years, if there's a political message in my talks, it's well hidden. I recall over the years walking home with one of my sons saying, you were really hinting at X, but I don't think anybody got it. I really haven't changed that much. I don't think I have. On the other hand, I'm absolutely astonished by the extent of the reaction. Right? Both the people I was at a family wedding last night, and someone came over to me to criticize me in very strong terms, and later that person's daughter and son-in-law came over to thank me. I'm not accustomed to being taken quite that seriously.
You're a very respected rabbi, so it's kind of funny to hear you say that you're not used to being taken seriously.
Well, I've had people criticizing me for questioning the community. For example, in the sexual abuse cases, it quote unquote gave the community a bad name. And so that I've been criticized before, but I've never had so many people react to me. That didn't occur to me when I agreed to have my name appear as the spearhead of this. I'm accustomed to writing articles and getting, some comments. My joke always has been that the people who agree with me come over and say, I agree with you, and the people who disagree write nasty letters.
Well, Rabbi, get used to your new political prominence because you're there. I'm really honored, and I thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast. Thanks again. Okay, it's been my pleasure, and I hope I wasn't too wordy. You're a rabbi. It's your job to be wordy. I could have quoted sources more. Thanks so much, Rabbi. Okay, be well. And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guests, Judy Maltz and Rabbi Yosef Blau, to producer Dan Brumer, and editors Dan Brumer, Avri Rosenzweig, and Maya Ben Nissan. If you'd like to continue to listen to this podcast, make sure you never miss an episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a 5-star rating. That way more people can find us. And to keep up with all the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.